Hello, and welcome to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, guidance, and inspiration. Because as we know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. And we're here with one of our amazing fresh starts experts, OG expert over here, Jo-Anne. Jo-Anne, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hi, I'm Jo-Anne Suriel. I am the founder of Energetic Well, and I am an energy healer. My specific modalities that I am certified in are the Akashic Records, Reiki, and sound healing. And my offering is really a combination of those things. So I have a one-on-one reading called Energetic Well reading, which is really mostly an Akashic Records reading, but then we also tie in Reiki and sound healing to help support that reading. And then the group version of that is called Energetic Well Sanctuary, where I read the records for the group and then do basically a ceremony for the group.
I love that. And I think healing your energy through a divorce is such an overlooked part of the divorce process because your energy just not only gets really trampled on by the end of a relationship, but also the divorce process in itself is so emotionally, spiritually taxing. So I've done Akashic Record readings with you. And I know it's something that you are very passionate about, but for anybody listening who doesn't know what an Akashic Records, they're like, what are you talking about? What is an Akashic Records reading, Jo-Anne?
That's a great question. So, the Akashic Records are basically like the history of your soul throughout lifetimes.
Mm,
So, we are writing our Akashic Records right now in this experience. So, every thought, emotion, experience that your soul has ever had is housed in this body, this energetic body called the Akashic Records. So, what we can do with that information is tap into that knowledge to ask about anything that's going on in your life right now, any hardships, any challenges, any repeated patterns that you see coming up can really be addressed. So it's actually, while it sounds very big and sort of out there, it can be a really practical reading where we can interact with the history of your soul to find out some root causes and also come up with practical solutions or remedies to help you really feel better and
yeah.
live a more fulfilled life.
I love that. And I think, again, it's something people don't realize is an option to work with you on this. And people can work virtually, right? So it's not like, I mean, you do a lot of local events, but
Yes. I do
um,
it both virtual and in person.
yeah.
And there's really no difference. I say the
No.
only difference with the in person experience is you will probably get a hug from me at the end.
Well, I do like that, but I've done it virtually with you and it was just as powerful. Jenny and I have both had experiences with you that really shook us. So, when you're going through a divorce and your energy is so low and you lose your footing, right? You lose your sense of who you are. So, what would you say if somebody's listening to this and they they're in therapy. They do all the things, but they still feel so lost. How can somebody going through divorce, work with you to read their Akashic records and really get the support they need?
Well, when we're in the Akashic Records, because it's so big, we really do have to zoom out from our perspective. And I think when you're going through something as major as divorce, it can feel like you're the only person in the world, you're the only
Yeah.
person suffering, that and your all of these issues are so magnified that they become overwhelming.
Yeah.
But with a reading, we can really step back and look at maybe this was something that happened in another lifetime. Maybe this is something that your soul is encouraging you to
Mm,
learn as a challenge so that you can really elevate your soul's path. So when we look at it that way, it doesn't
mm,
feel as daunting and you don't
yeah.
feel so alone because you're really not alone. And I think that's another thing when you're getting divorced, you feel, it's like a
Yeah.
physical separation, an emotional separation, and it takes some real adjustment, real getting used to. But yeah, it's a place of non-judgment, really.
Mm,
We're not ever going to say, oh, this is your fault, or place any blame
yeah.
or anything
Yeah.
like that. I love that it's such a broad perspective, because really, if you think about, the history of humanity is like Homo sapiens are like 300,000 years old.
Yeah.
And then the history of marriage is only like maybe 4,000 years old.
Mm,
And so this is something that it's not, there's nothing wrong with you, there's
yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
wrong with you
No.
if you're not abiding by this
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
rigid
I love that perspective. I love
structure.
that. I
So
love that. Yeah.
when we can zoom out, we really can put things in better perspective and know that it's not your fault. It's not really anyone's fault. That this is part
Yeah.
of a very long journey.
I love that because, obviously we believe that divorce is a transition, just like any other transition, right? And there's reasons for the, the person in your life, right? Maybe it's the person you had children with or you learned something from them, and then it's okay to let them go. But I think there's probably a lot of validation that comes from working with you and hearing that from your Akashic records of like, oh, this is part of the bigger plan.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's also, I mean, nature is really a big part of everything I do also, even
Mm,
though, you think of the Akashic Records as this very spiritual thing, but spirituality is everywhere, and especially it
yeah.
is in nature.
Yeah.
And if you look at nature, yes, there are relationships that are very well formed and that can stay together for a long time,
Yeah.
but that's not a uniform thing in nature.
It's true.
Nature doesn't like lock in and then
Mm-mm.
decide like,
Contract,
okay,
yeah.
we're not changing at
Yeah,
all. So when we remember that we are nature, that also lends to
yeah,
the path towards self-acceptance
yeah.
and hopefully back to self-love.
Okay, I have a very stupid question for you, Jo-Anne, but if somebody's listening to this and they're like, "She keeps talking about, like, records," like, what does it look like, right, if somebody, like, signs up for a session with you? Like, can you just walk us through a very general, like, to kind of dispel any misinformation about what Akashic records are?
Yeah. So, what we would do is I would lead you first through a grounding meditation so that we can settle our energy together. It's very brief. And then I open the records by reading a prayer. So, I read this prayer out loud using your legal name, which kind of sounds funny. It's like, why do I need a legal name? But
Mhm.
energetically, your whatever name you have in this
Mm.
incarnation carries a
Mhm.
vibration. If
Mm.
you were to legally change your name, that vibration would shift. So
Mm.
we use a prayer with your name to open up your records. And once we access the records, we can go back and forth with any questions, any um, transmissions that need
Mm.
to come through. And then at the end, I will close your records with another prayer. But I always like to emphasize that you actually have access to your Akashic records at any time. I'm not a
Mm.
gatekeeper by any means. This is just a process for me to have permission to access your Akashic records. So
Got it.
it sounds like it's a funny name.
Mm.
I'll admit that. Like,
Yeah.
records are like, what is
Yeah.
this? And some people
Mhm.
describe it as like a library, like a
Mm.
metaphysical
Mhm.
library.
Mhm.
I like to think of it more as a database because that feels
Mm.
more fluid.
Yeah.
But it sounds like a lot of info, but usually whatever comes through is whatever you are meant to hear in this
Yeah.
moment, whatever would be most supportive to you at this time.
So if somebody is listening and they're like that, look, that sounds so cool. I want that. You offer, obviously, like we said, virtual one-on-ones. How do people find you? How can they purchase that session with you?
Sure, yeah, you can find me at my website, which is energeticwell.com, or on social media at the Energetic Well. And I have one-on-one sessions called Energetic Well Readings, which does this Akashic record reading, but I conclude it with Reiki and sound healing
Mm,
to really help integrate and support
I love that.
any messages that came up during the
I love that.
session.
I love that. It's so necessary during a divorce because we really don't take care of our souls. And it's just like then we end up totally ragged at the end of the process. So I'm glad that you're available for people to do that. And before we let you go, Jo-Anne, if anybody's listening to this and they're going through a divorce, what would be some words of encouragement that you could leave them with?
Hmm. I would say that you are not alone. There's nothing wrong with you, and that this too is part of your soul's journey. You are meant to transcend this experience.
Mm.
So I would leave you with that because there really are no coincidences I have seen in my practice. And so while you may be feeling like, why is this happening to me? The the answer might not be immediate, but you can trust and have faith that there is a purpose to all of this and that it will be revealed at some point.
I love that. It's such great advice. Well, you can find all of Jo-Anne's info in the show notes, and you can go book a session with her, which I highly recommend. And you can also find Jo-Anne at Fresh Starts Registry in the Expert Guide. Jo-Anne, we are so happy you're part of Fresh Starts and for the work you do. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Olivia. It was a pleasure.